name's Judy Doherty. Thank you, Jonathan, for the introduction. I teach in the fields of construction and quantity surveying. The topic I'm going to talk about today is measurement microlearning, which is something that Dr. Rick Best in our faculty has been developing. He's on leave at the moment, so as I'm actually one of the primary people using it or having the students to use it, then I think I'm in a really good position to be able to tell you all about it. The introduction for this particular session says, from the monotony of building measurement, ... That's what I teach, okay, so... So we do try and make it interesting. There's a lot to learn in measurement, but let me tell you what measurement's about first of all. So measurement is primarily concerned with quantifying construction materials for the purpose of costing of building projects. So it's the core skill of quantity surveyors. So all schools of architecture, all schools of construction and quantity surveying teach building measurement to their students. One of my students this semester said it's like learning another language, and in a way it is like learning another language, as far as language has structure and rules of grammar and punctuation and tense and so forth. Measurement has its own set of rules, and while it's essentially mathematically based, it's not set out the same way that anyone's ever learnt maths before. So it is really, it is really about doing something that you think you know about in a totally different way. So we learn to set out our work in a different way. We learn to follow a particular set of rules that are set down in the Australian Standard Method of Measurement, which it gives us. I think the next slide actually shows it, and I'll come back to this. It's the cover, for what it's worth. The Australian Standard Method of Measurement is our guidebook. It is our main textbook and reference book. It tells us the rules that we need to follow in order to have consistent method of measurement, that is, and consistency is what it's all about, and communication. So the ASMM, this book, sets out all the rules as a set of measurement, and there are lots of rules, and there's lots of peculiar little rules and concepts and things that the students are required to know and to understand. So, I mean, this calculation here is probably, a typical sort of takeoff or, beginning of a measurement process, so you can see that it's different to regular setting out of sums in school. So the rules that we use for measurement are taught to the students in the first two sessions. So in a weekly program, that's the first 2 weeks. In an intensive program, which our postgraduate students undertake, that means the first full day of their course is focused on just learning learning all the rules of measurement. And they need to be done, they need to be learned initially so that, or primarily they need to be learned first up so that the rules then can be applied to the actual process of measurement as we go on through the course. So it's a lot to absorb. It's a lot for the students to absorb, and if they don't absorb it right up front there, they're going to have trouble, and they're going to have difficulties with the rest of the course. So what Rick Best had the idea to do was to take all of those particular and peculiar rules and concepts that we need to deal with in building measurement and make each into a small, bite-sized, delicious hunk of measurement, a rule, a concept. So each concept then is developed into a graphical and animated video. So the students can come back and look at those at their leisure, in their own time, for their own revision. So the process has been, first of all, to prepare a basic set of PowerPoint slides. This is Rick's process, the way he's gone about doing this. He prepares a basic PowerPoint slide with text and voiceover, which will explain one isolated measurement concept. It'll have some basic animations, arrows or zoom in, zoom out sort of things. Just pretty basic PowerPoint presentation though. He records the voiceover using Camtasia, and initially then it looks like this. Now I know this is going to run, it's going to run for a period of time, so I'm just going to talk ahead of it for a moment. So we'll look at two parts. The first part will be what you see next. Immediately following that will be what it ends up as. So what makes it special? What makes this special? One of the architecture students, a senior architecture student, Richard, whose surname is a little unusual, I'm not going to try and pronounce it in case I do it wrongly, takes the PowerPoint and he animates it using software called Video Scribe. And I think you'll see the difference between the first one, which is fairly plain, and the second one, which has music and action and animation. So let's have a look at the first.
Building measurement concepts, number 3.
This is Rick's voiceover.
In this one, we're going to deal with a document called the Australian Standard Method of Measurement of Building Works. We'll have several clips devoted to this, but this is an important document, one that you'll use or refer to quite often. So the ASMM, as we call it, actually is short for the Australian Standard Method of Measurement of Building Works, and we're currently using the 5th edition, which has been around actually now for about 25 years.
All right.
It is a set of instructions about how we measure building work.
Okay, yeah,
Would be
volume's fine.
primarily for the purpose of producing buildings.
So what I wanted to point out was it's fairly basic, just words, voice. It's got great information, but it's a little bit boring. So if you had to come back and review that, you'd probably be dozing off fairly shortly, I think, even for us, and we love this stuff. So what Richard manages to do with it is quite delightful. He animates it, and the animation he does is timed to suit the actual voiceover that Rick's already done, so it's not doubling up on the process either.
Building measurement concepts, number 12. An explanation of the term girth. A basic definition of girth is this: the measurement around the middle of something. But for quantity surveyors and construction people generally, there are also related, but they're rather more specific meanings of this word. It's easier to show you than try to describe it in words, so let's have a look at some examples. This is a very simple case. The girth of a tree, for instance, is simply the distance around the trunk. And we are required by the standard method to consider the girth of trees that have to be removed from a site, for instance. Trees of a small girth just tend to be included in general site clearance, where bigger trees with bigger girths, which require bigger equipment and more time and therefore more cost to remove, are measured according to their girth. And here's another example. The girth of a room is the perimeter, and in this case, pretty easy to calculate. Twice the long side plus twice the short side gives us a girth here, a perimeter of 18.80 metres. But here's another case that's a little bit different. This is a section through a cavity brick wall showing a typical cavity flashing. And what the flashing is there for is to stop water penetrating through this, the outer skin of brickwork and then into the inner skin, which could then lead to moisture problems inside the building. The way it works is that rain can come in through the brickwork, particularly if there are gaps in the mortar, for instance, and that can happen as mortar ages and gets a little bit crumbly perhaps. Even brickwork itself is not waterproof. Heavy rain with a strong wind behind it can drive rain in through tiny cracks and through the brickwork. Of course, once it gets to the cavity, it runs down the inside face of the wall, of the outer skin of the wall, until it hits this flashing, which is shaped in such a way that then it leads that water back out through a weep hole. And a weep hole is shown there as a brick with diagonal lines across it. A weep hole is simply a vertical joint, what's called a perpend, P-E-R-P-E-N-D, and a perpend is left with no mortar in it every so often to create a weep hole to allow the water to escape. Now, we describe such a flashing, and there's a picture, a 3D picture of it here, by its girth, which in this case is the width of the piece of flat material that can be folded or bent into this shape in order to create that cavity flashing. So it has a 25mm downturn on the outside, 110mm to go across the outer skin of brickwork, around about 180mm on the slope up 2 courses, and then another 110mm back into the inside skin of the brickwork. So you see that gives us an approximate girth of, or width of 420mm. We call it a girth because it won't, once it's been bent into this shape, it will no longer be flat.
Should sign off at that point, but it didn't. All right. Okay. So you can see, I think quite clearly that that's much more engaging sort of little animation of a particularly pertinent topic in the way you measure something within this subject. So generally benefits then for the students, they're easy and specific topics that they can take one at a time or however many they need. They can the intention is to build into my lecture, little icons or something to say there's a micro-learning topic about this, so the two things will be together. So they're small bites, as I said, easily digested. They can do it whenever they like. They can take it on their iPad or whatever because they're portable. They're just little MP4 videos. And it's particularly good for students, ESL students, who need generally a little more time to absorb some of these concepts just because the language is it's foreign to them, of course. So for teachers, it allows us more class time for going through exercise and actually practicing measurement, because it is a subject that you get better at with practice, and being able to take the focus away from reiterating these basic measurement rules allows us to get more practice time. And it reduces that frequency of questions on basic topics, hopefully, as well. There are very few textbooks available to us in Australia for building measurement, so this adds as well in that respect to our body of knowledge that we have access to. So feedback initially, we've only released, my first group of postgraduate students have looked at these just in their first intensive, which began last Thursday. And the initial feedback has been absolutely fantastic. They've really enjoyed looking at them, and they've really learned a lot from these micro-learning videos, and that's been so encouraging. So in summary, I guess we're going to have an expanding catalogue of these micro-learning, or the plan is to have an expanding catalogue of these micro-learning videos. I think Rick's intention is that there would be like somewhere around 200 of them ultimately. So, with time and a bit of funding, we'll be able to achieve that. So, each little video, as it says, it's a bite-sized chunk. It's no more than 5 to 10 minutes, and it's dealing with just one concept at a time. And so it's been, I think, a really valuable process, and it looks like it's going to be really successful for the students and for the teachers. Really successful outcome.